Sometimes the person everyone blames is the only one telling the truth. Emily Carter had no idea those words would define the worst day of her life. The 24-year-old janitor pushed her cleaning cart through the polished halls of Brooks Global just after 8 a.m. outside the glass walls. The Chicago skyline shimmered beneath a bright spring sun. Inside, tension hung in the air. Employees moved faster than usual. Executives whispered as they rushed toward the largest conference room in the building. A billion-dollar partnership was on the line. Emily kept her head down. She always did. People rarely noticed her anyway. To most employees, she was just the girl who emptied trash cans and wiped fingerprints from glass doors. Yet she knew every floor of the tower better than anyone. She knew who stayed late. She knew who treated people kindly. She knew who never looked her in the eye. That morning felt different. Strange. Uneasy. As she approached the executive floor, she noticed a senior director leaving the conference room. The man looked nervous. His tie was crooked. His expression was tight. For a moment, their eyes met. Then he quickly walked away. Emily frowned, but continued working. Minutes later, the conference room began filling with executives. Investors arrived. Attorneys took seats. Assistants carried tablets and folders. Then Ethan Brooks entered. The CEO commanded attention without saying a word. At 34, he had built one of the fastest-growing companies in the country. Employees admired him. Some feared him. Emily had only seen him from a distance. Today was no different. She lowered her gaze and continued polishing a glass panel near the entrance. Suddenly, a sharp voice called from inside the room. Someone was asking for a missing presentation file. Another executive sounded frustrated. The atmosphere shifted instantly. Confusion spread around the table. Emily glanced up. A few people were searching through folders. Others checked their laptops. Then a coffee cup tipped over. Dark liquid splashed across several printed documents. Chairs scraped against the floor. Voices rose. Panic erupted. Emily froze. She had not touched anything. Yet she immediately felt every eye turning toward her. What happened? Someone demanded. Before she could answer, another voice spoke. The janitor was just outside. Murmurs spread through the room. Emily's stomach dropped. No, she said quietly. I didn't. The sentence never finished. Ethan Brooks stood. The room fell silent. His face revealed nothing. Not anger. Not sympathy. Nothing at all. He looked at the damaged documents, then at Emily. Seconds felt like hours. Finally, he spoke. Get out. Emily blinked. Sir, I can explain. His voice became colder. You're fired. The words hit harder than she expected. Around the room, people avoided her eyes. No one defended her. No one asked questions. Humiliation burned through her chest as she turned toward the door. She thought losing her job was the worst thing that could happen. She was wrong. Because the moment she disappeared down the hallway, Ethan Brooks looked at his head of security and quietly said, Find everything about that girl. Right now. The elevator doors closed behind Emily Carter as she left the executive floor for the last time. Her hands trembled around the handle of her cleaning cart. She kept her eyes forward, refusing to let anyone see the tears gathering in them. A few employees glanced her way. Others whispered. Nobody stopped her. Nobody asked what had really happened. By the time she reached the lobby, the humiliation felt heavier than the cart she had pushed through the building every day for nearly 2 years. Outside, a cold breeze swept through the streets of downtown Chicago. Emily stepped onto the sidewalk and stared at the glass tower behind her. Brooks Global had been more than a job. It had been stability. It had been rent money, grocery money, a chance to keep moving forward after years of setbacks. Now it was gone. She slowly pulled out her phone and checked her bank account. The number on the screen made her stomach tighten. There was barely enough to cover next month's expenses. Taking a deep breath, she began walking toward the bus stop. Across the city, on the top floor of Brooks Global, Ethan Brooks stood in silence while executives argued around the conference table. Some blamed the missing files. Others blamed the failed presentation. Ethan listened without speaking. Something about the situation felt wrong. Emily's expression kept replaying in his mind. She had looked shocked, confused, not guilty. The head of security entered the room carrying a tablet. Ethan gave him a brief nod. Minutes later, they stepped into a private office overlooking Lake Michigan. Security footage appeared on the screen. Ethan watched carefully. The recording showed the conference room nearly 20 minutes before the meeting began. A senior director entered alone. He approached the presentation materials. He opened a folder. Then he removed several documents before quickly leaving. Ethan narrowed his eyes. The same man Emily had crossed paths with earlier that morning. Another clip followed. The director returned moments later. He looked around nervously before placing a coffee cup dangerously close to the remaining files. Ethan's jaw tightened. The accident had not been an accident at all. Meanwhile, Emily arrived at her small apartment building on the north side of the city. The brick structure was old. Paint peeled from the railings. A flickering light hung above the entrance. She climbed the stairs and unlocked her door. The tiny apartment felt quiet, safe, yet the silence only made her thoughts louder. She sat at the kitchen table and stared at the termination email that had already arrived in her inbox. One click. 2 years erased. Emily closed her eyes. She had survived worse before. She would survive this too. What she did not know was that someone was already digging through every detail of her past. Back in the skyscraper, Ethan opened a newly delivered personnel file. Expecting to see an ordinary background report, he instead found something that made him sit forward in disbelief. The woman everyone believed was just a janitor had been hiding a secret that changed everything. The file remained open on Ethan Brooks's desk long after everyone else had gone home. Chicago's skyline glowed outside his office windows, yet he barely noticed. His attention stayed fixed on the woman whose name appeared at the top of the report. Emily Carter. According to company records, she was a janitor earning an hourly wage. According to the documents in front of him, that was only a fraction of the truth. Ethan slowly turned another page. For years earlier, Emily had graduated near the top of her class from Northwestern University with a degree in business analytics. Her professors had described her as one of the most promising students they had ever taught. Several major companies had offered her positions before graduation. Ethan frowned. None of it made sense. People with credentials like these did not usually disappear into low-paying jobs. They certainly did not spend years cleaning office buildings. Something had happened. Something significant. He pressed a button on his desk phone. Within moments, his head of security entered the office. Ethan slid the file across the desk. Find out why she walked away from all of this. The man nodded and left. Across town, Emily sat beside her apartment window watching rain begin to fall over the city streets. The evening had grown colder. Cars moved slowly through wet intersections below. She wrapped a blanket around her shoulders and stared at an old cardboard box resting in the corner of the room. For months, she had avoided opening it. Tonight, she could not stop looking at it. Finally, she stood and carried the box to the kitchen table. Inside were reminders of another life. Academic awards, internship certificates, letters of recommendation, dreams she once believed were certain to come true. A small smile touched her face before fading again. Back then, she had imagined a future filled with opportunities. Then everything changed. A sudden phone notification interrupted her thoughts. Another job application rejection. Emily sighed and placed the phone aside. The timing almost felt cruel. She had not even been unemployed for a full day. Meanwhile, inside Brooks Global, the investigation continued. New security footage revealed something even more troubling. The senior director who had removed documents from the conference room had exchanged several private messages with an outside competitor during the previous week. Financial records showed unusual transactions. Ethan leaned back in his chair. The problem inside his company was growing larger by the hour. Yet one detail bothered him most. Why had Emily been blamed so quickly? Why had multiple executives immediately pointed fingers at her before any evidence existed? It felt coordinated, deliberate. As midnight approached, another report arrived. Ethan opened it expecting information about corporate misconduct. Instead, he found a handwritten statement from one of the building's maintenance supervisors. The employee described Emily as honest, hardworking, and unusually intelligent. One sentence stood out above all the others. She once stopped a serious internal mistake that could have cost the company millions of dollars, but she never took credit for it. Ethan stared at the words. The more he learned about Emily Carter, the less she resembled the person everyone thought they knew. Then his phone rang. The investigator's voice sounded urgent. Sir, we discovered why she left her old career path. Ethan stood immediately. Tell me. A brief silence followed. What he heard next changed the entire direction of the investigation. The investigator's words echoed in Ethan Brooks's mind long after the call ended. Emily Carter had not abandoned her future because she failed. She had walked away from it by choice. 4 years earlier, just weeks before starting a prestigious corporate position, her father had suffered a severe medical emergency. The recovery lasted months. Medical bills piled up faster than the family could manage. At the same time, her mother lost her job. Emily had stepped in without hesitation. She turned down career opportunities, sold nearly everything she owned, and worked wherever she could to keep her family afloat. According to the report, she never told anyone. She never asked for help. Ethan stared through the office window at the city lights below. In business, he spent his days evaluating people. Success, failure, talent, potential. Yet somehow his company had reduced a woman like Emily to a name on a janitorial schedule. The realization left him unsettled. Early the next morning, Emily woke before sunrise. Sleep had been nearly impossible. Her mind kept replaying the previous day. The stares, the whispers. The moment her career disappeared in front of dozens of people. She pushed the memories aside and opened her laptop. New job applications waited to be completed. Rent was due in less than 3 weeks. She could not afford self-pity. Hours passed. Rejections arrived almost as quickly as applications were submitted. Many employers wanted recent experience in fields she had left years ago. Others never responded. By noon, frustration settled heavily across her shoulders. Then her phone rang. The number was unfamiliar. Emily hesitated before answering. A calm voice introduced itself as a recruiter. For a moment, hope sparked inside her. It vanished seconds later. The position had already been filled. The call ended politely. The disappointment lingered. Across the city, Ethan was uncovering a different problem. Security investigators had finished reviewing internal communications. The evidence pointed directly towards Senior Director Victor Lang. Several executives appeared connected to him. Private messages suggested an organized effort to manipulate the failed meeting. Missing files, false accusations, coordinated blame. The pieces were finally coming together. Yet one question remained unanswered. Why had Emily become their target? Ethan studied a timeline prepared by his team. One detail immediately caught his attention. 3 months earlier, Emily had submitted an anonymous report about unusual activity involving confidential documents left unsecured after business hours. The report had been ignored. Victor Lang's name appeared in the records connected to that incident. Ethan leaned forward. Suddenly everything made sense. Emily had unknowingly become a threat to people she never even realized were watching her. She had seen things others hoped would remain hidden. Meanwhile, Emily left her apartment to clear her thoughts. A cool breeze drifted through the neighborhood as she walked several blocks toward a small public park. Children played near a fountain. Families sat on benches. Life continued as though nothing had changed. She found an empty seat beneath a large oak tree and stared across the grass. For the first time since being fired, she allowed herself to wonder whether losing the job had exposed something bigger than simple bad luck. A strange feeling settled over her. She could not explain it. She only knew that the story was far from over. At that exact moment, a black sedan pulled to the curb nearby, and the man stepping out of the back seat was someone she never expected to see. Emily stared across the park, certain her eyes were playing tricks on her. The man stepping from the black sedan could not possibly be there. Yet as he straightened his suit jacket and looked in her direction, there was no mistake. Ethan Brooks had come himself. Her pulse quickened. Of all the people she expected to see that afternoon, the CEO of Brooks Global was not one of them. For a moment she considered standing up and leaving. Instead, she remained seated, watching as he crossed the pathway toward her. Ethan noticed the caution in her expression. He could hardly blame her. Less than 24 hours earlier, he had publicly fired her. Now he was standing in front of her with answers she deserved, but did not yet have. Emily spoke first. "Why are you here?" The question was direct. Ethan appreciated that. "Because I owe you an explanation," he replied. A light breeze rustled the leaves above them. Nearby, children laughed as they chased one another across the grass. The ordinary sounds of the afternoon felt strangely distant. Emily folded her arms. "An explanation does not give me my job back." Ethan nodded slowly. "I know." Silence settled between them. Finally, he sat on the opposite end of the bench. Not too close. Not distant either. "You were blamed for something you did not do." Emily stared at him. "You figured that out pretty quickly." The disappointment in her voice landed harder than anger would have. Ethan looked away briefly. Not quickly enough. For the first time since losing her job, Emily saw something unexpected in him. Regret. Genuine regret. Before she could respond, Ethan continued. The meeting was sabotaged. We have evidence. Several people inside the company were involved. Emily felt her thoughts race. Part of her wanted to feel vindicated. Another part struggled to process everything she was hearing. Why would anyone involve me? She asked quietly. Ethan studied her expression. Because you noticed things. Emily frowned. What things? 3 months ago, you submitted a report about confidential documents being left unsecured. Recognition flashed across her face. She remembered it clearly. During a late shift, she had found sensitive materials sitting unattended in a conference room. Following company policy, she reported it. Nothing appeared to happen afterward. At least that was what she had believed. Ethan leaned forward slightly. The people responsible never forgot that report. Emily's stomach tightened. Suddenly, several strange interactions from the past few months made more sense. The unusual stares. Conversations that stopped when she entered a room. The feeling that certain executives viewed her differently. Ethan watched realization spread across her face. You became a problem without even knowing it. Emily let out a slow breath. Everything she thought she understood was changing. Yet one question still remained. How did you find me? Ethan hesitated. Then he told the truth. I started looking into your background. Emily's eyes narrowed. Why? Ethan reached into his briefcase and removed a thin folder. He handed it to her. Confused, she opened it. The first page showed copies of academic records, scholarship awards, internship offers, achievements she had not looked at in years. Her expression shifted instantly. Ethan watched carefully. Because none of it made sense, he said. The more I learned about you, the more questions I had. Emily slowly turned another page. Then another. Memories she had spent years burying returned all at once. What she did not know was that Ethan had discovered one final detail hidden deep inside those records, a detail that connected their lives long before either of them realized it. Emily lowered the folder into her lap and looked at Ethan with growing confusion. The late afternoon sun had begun to sink behind the Chicago skyline, casting long shadows across the park. Families were heading home. The pathways grew quieter, yet neither of them seemed aware of the passing time. Her attention remained fixed on the final sentence Ethan had spoken, a detail that connected their lives. What are you talking about? She asked. Ethan took a slow breath. For the first time since arriving, he appeared uncertain. When I was reviewing your university records, I found something unexpected. Emily waited. 5 years ago, before Brooks Global became what it is today, our company sponsored a national student competition. A faint memory stirred in her mind. Ethan continued. The winning proposal came from a student named Emily Carter. Her eyes widened slightly. She remembered the competition. Hundreds of students had entered. Months of work had gone into her submission. She had never forgotten the excitement of receiving the acceptance letter. Then life had changed before she could pursue any of the opportunities that followed. Ethan gave a small nod. I still remember reading that proposal. It was one of the smartest business strategies I had ever seen from a student. Emily blinked in surprise. You read it? Personally. For a moment, neither spoke. The revelation felt strangely unreal. Years earlier, their paths had crossed without either of them meeting. While Emily had been building a future she never got to live, Ethan had already recognized her talent. You never knew it was me, she said quietly. No, Ethan admitted. But I never forgot the name. Emily looked away. The emotions inside her were difficult to untangle. Part of her felt honored. Another part felt frustrated by everything that had happened since then. The distance between who she had been and who she had become suddenly felt enormous. Ethan seemed to understand. Life took you somewhere different. A soft laugh escaped her. That is one way to put it. The conversation shifted. Slowly at first, then more naturally. For nearly an hour they talked. Not as CEO and former employee. Not as strangers. Simply as two people sharing pieces of their lives. Ethan learned about the sacrifices she had made for her family. Emily learned that success had brought him responsibilities most people never saw. Beneath the polished image presented to the public, there was a man carrying constant pressure. The more they spoke, the more Ethan found himself admiring her resilience. Many people would have become bitter after facing so many disappointments. Emily had not. Somehow she remained kind, thoughtful, grounded. As evenings settled over the city, Ethan's phone suddenly vibrated. He glanced at the screen. The expression on his face changed immediately. Emily noticed. "What happened?" she asked. Ethan stood. The investigation just uncovered new evidence. His voice had become serious again. "Victor Lang is moving faster than we expected." Emily felt a knot form in her stomach. "What does that mean?" Ethan looked toward the skyline. "It means whoever organized this knows we are getting close." A silence followed. Then Ethan made a decision. "I need you somewhere safe while we sort this out." Emily frowned. "Safe from what?" Ethan looked directly at her. "From becoming the person they blame for everything." The words hung heavily in the air. Then his phone rang again. This time, the update was even worse. Someone inside Brooks Global had just accessed confidential records connected to Emily Carter. Emily felt the tension immediately. Ethan lowered his phone and stared at the screen for a few seconds before slipping it back into his pocket. The relaxed conversation they had shared moments earlier was gone. In its place stood the focused CEO who had built one of the most successful companies in the country. The difference was impossible to miss. "Tell me what is happening," Emily said. Ethan hesitated only briefly. "Someone used executive credentials to access your personnel records less than 10 minutes ago." Emily stood from the bench. "Why would they care about my records?" "Because they are trying to find out what I already know." The answer only deepened her confusion. Ethan motioned toward the waiting sedan. "We should leave." During the drive across the city, neither spoke much. Chicago's evening traffic crawled beneath glowing streetlights while questions filled Emily's mind. Every answer seemed to create 3 new mysteries. When the vehicle finally stopped, she looked out the window, expecting another office building. Instead, she saw a quiet private conference center owned by Brooks Global. The property sat along the edge of Lake Michigan, far from downtown. Security personnel monitored the entrance. Ethan led her inside. The building was modern but comfortable. Large windows overlooked the water. A conference room near the back had already been prepared. Several members of Ethan's security team were reviewing documents and digital records displayed across multiple screens. Emily stopped in the doorway. Her name appeared on one of the monitors. So did Victor Lang's. Ethan stepped beside her. "We are close to proving everything." A woman from the investigation team approached. "We found additional communications between Victor and outside contacts." She handed Ethan a folder. He opened it immediately. Emily watched his expression darken as he read. "What is it?" she asked. Ethan looked up. Victor was not just trying to sabotage the meeting. The room grew quiet. He was preparing to shift responsibility for missing corporate information onto someone else. Emily felt cold. "Me?" Ethan nodded. No one needed to say the word aloud. The evidence made it obvious. For months, a plan had been quietly unfolding inside the company. Emily had become the perfect target because nobody paid attention to her. She moved through offices unnoticed. She worked after hours. If accusations appeared, people would believe them. The realization was deeply unsettling. Yet before anyone could continue, another investigator rushed into the room, carrying a tablet. "We just received this." The screen displayed a newly leaked email circulating among several executives. Emily's eyes widened as she read. The message falsely implied that she had intentionally interfered with company operations. Someone was actively spreading misinformation. Ethan's jaw tightened. They are getting desperate. The team immediately began tracing the source. Minutes felt like hours. Then a breakthrough arrived. The email had originated from an account linked directly to Victor Lang's network. Several senior executives connected to him had already started deleting internal communications. They knew the truth was coming. For the first time since this ordeal began, Emily saw confidence replace uncertainty in Ethan's eyes. "They made a mistake," he said. "A very big one." Emily looked at him. "What happens now?" Ethan closed the folder and faced the investigation team. "Tomorrow morning we end this." Everyone in the room understood what he meant. The evidence was finally strong enough. The truth would come out publicly. Reputations would change. Careers would shift. Secrets would disappear. As the meeting ended, Ethan received one final message from his legal department. He read it once, then slowly smiled. The most important piece of evidence had just been recovered. The next morning, Brooks Global felt completely different. Employees entered the building with nervous expressions. Rumors had spread overnight. Executives whispered in hallways. Department managers checked their phones repeatedly. Something important was about to happen. Everyone could feel it. On the top floor, the largest conference room in the company was filled beyond capacity. Senior leadership, legal advisors, board members, and department heads occupied nearly every seat. At the front of the room stood Ethan Brooks. Calm, focused, confident. Emily remained near the back beside members of the investigation team. Part of her still could not believe she was there. Less than 48 hours earlier, she had walked out of the building believing her future was over. Now she was about to hear the truth revealed in front of everyone. The room fell silent as Ethan began speaking. He reviewed the failed meeting, the missing documents, the accusations that followed. Several executives shifted uncomfortably in their chairs. Then Ethan displayed security footage on the large screens. The evidence was impossible to ignore. Employees watched as Victor Lang entered the conference room before the meeting. They watched him remove critical files. They watched him create the exact conditions that later led to confusion and blame. Murmurs spread throughout the room. Victor's face lost color. Ethan continued without raising his voice. Next came internal communications. Private messages. Time. Stamps. Financial records. Every piece connected to the same network of individuals. The investigation had uncovered months of deception. Attempts to manipulate company decisions. Efforts to hide information. Plans to redirect responsibility onto someone who lacked the power to defend herself. Ethan paused. His gaze moved toward Emily. The person blamed for these actions had absolutely no involvement. The room followed his eyes. For the first time, people looked at Emily differently. Not as a janitor. Not as an easy target. They saw the truth. Ethan displayed the final piece of evidence. The document recovered only hours earlier. It contained direct proof that false accusations against Emily had been discussed before the meeting ever took place. The strategy had been planned in advance. Silence filled the room. Victor Lang slowly stood. His expression revealed that he understood the situation completely. There was nothing left to deny. Company attorneys stepped forward. Board members exchanged brief words. Formal procedures immediately began. Emily barely heard them. She was too overwhelmed by what had just happened. Every doubt, every humiliation, every painful question she had carried since losing her job suddenly disappeared. Ethan turned toward her. Emily Carter deserves a public apology from this company. The words echoed through the conference room. One by one, executives who had rushed to judge her lowered their eyes. Some apologized directly. Others remained silent, unable to meet her gaze. The moment felt surreal. Yet the biggest surprise came next. Ethan approached the podium once more. There is something else everyone should know. The room quieted again. Ethan looked toward Emily, his expression softer than she had ever seen before. This investigation started because I believed an innocent person had been treated unfairly. He paused. What I did not expect was to discover someone extraordinary. Emily felt her heart skip. The room watched in complete silence. Ethan stepped down from the podium and walked directly toward her. No one spoke. No one moved. Then, standing in front of everyone, he said words that left the entire room stunned. The conference room became so quiet that Emily could hear her own heartbeat. Dozens of executives, board members, and employees watched as Ethan Brooks stopped only a few feet away from her. Nobody knew what he was about to say. Emily did not know either. A moment earlier, she had been focused on finally clearing her name. Now every eye in the room was on her. Ethan smiled gently. It was the first time most people had ever seen that expression from him. Over the last 2 days, he said, I learned more about character, integrity, and courage from Emily Carter than I have learned from some people in years. The room remained silent. Ethan continued. When life became difficult, she did not quit. When she was treated unfairly, she did not become bitter. When she had every reason to blame others, she chose dignity instead. Emily felt emotion rise in her chest. No one had ever spoken about her that way before. Ethan looked directly at her. The company failed you. I failed you. For that, I am truly sorry. The sincerity in his voice left no room for doubt. Then he reached into his jacket pocket and removed a small envelope. Confused murmurs spread across the room. Emily accepted it carefully. Inside was a formal employment agreement. Her eyes widened as she read the first page. It was not a janitorial position. It was a leadership role within Brooks Global's business strategy division. The salary was more than she had ever imagined earning. Emily looked up in disbelief. You cannot be serious. Ethan smiled. I have never been more serious. Several board members nodded their agreement. The offer had already been approved. Everything she had worked for years ago was suddenly within reach again. Yet Ethan was not finished. He took a slow breath. There is one more thing. A few people exchanged curious looks. Emily's heart raced. Ethan stepped closer. The truth is, this investigation stopped being only about company policy a long time ago. The room seemed to disappear around them. Every conversation we shared showed me the kind of person you are. His voice remained calm. You are intelligent, honest, compassionate, strong. And somewhere along the way, I realized I was looking forward to seeing you more than I was looking forward to any meeting on my calendar. Soft smiles appeared throughout the room. Emily could hardly believe what she was hearing. Ethan shook his head slightly, almost amused by himself. I built an entire company based on recognizing value. Somehow I nearly missed the most remarkable person in the building. A gentle wave of laughter moved through the audience. Emily felt tears gathering in her eyes. Not from sadness, from relief, from gratitude, from the overwhelming realization that her life had changed completely. Ethan extended his hand toward her. I am not asking for an answer today. He smiled. I am simply asking if you would have dinner with me tonight. The room finally erupted into applause. Emily laughed through her tears and nodded. Yes, I would like that. Weeks later, their first dinner became many dinners. Friendship grew into something deeper. Respect became affection. Affection became love. 1 year later, surrounded by family, friends, and colleagues, Emily and Ethan exchanged wedding vows overlooking Lake Michigan. As she looked across the celebration, Emily remembered the day she thought everything had ended. She smiled. Sometimes the worst moment of a person's life is not the ending of their story. Sometimes it is the moment that finally leads them to exactly where they were meant to be.